series for the Pacific Graduate Institute DreamWork class. Today I'm talking to Beverly Urso, and she is an avid lucid dreamer, lifelong lucid dreamer, and is actually the original oneironaut who took place in took part in Stephen LaBerge's Stanford lucid dream experiments. And Beverly, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today. Tell me a little bit about your early lucid dream experiences. What started you lucid dreaming, and how those early experiences were? You were quite young.
Yeah, I guess you'd call it my first time I remembered having a lucid dream, although at the time I had no idea what it was called. It was just the first time that I was in the dream and knew for sure that I was dreaming. And this occurred around when I was about 7 years old, and I was having these reoccurring nightmares, probably for a couple years, where these really scary witches who lived in the closet of my bedroom home would come out and chase me. And I really hated having the dream. I thought about it a lot, and I started to think that, gee, the witches only come and chase me this way in my dream state. So really, I shouldn't have to be afraid. Well, what happened was they started coming after me in a way where they would hover over my head, and I started saying, "Take me in tomorrow's dream." So I had a sense of lucidity, but not enough to know that they weren't necessarily going to harm me, that dream body was not who I really am. Until one night, they were hovering over me, and I looked these scary witches in the eye. They still looked quite frightening.
Yeah, you're a little girl.
Yeah, and I just said, "Okay, wait a minute. What do you want? Let's get this over with now." And what I found was that they simply turned around and flew away. There were 3 witches together, from the way I remember it. So that was very exciting. Not only was I able to face up to the witches and stop this particular series of nightmares, of reoccurring dreams, but at that point I knew that I could find myself in a dream and know I'm dreaming and do whatever I wanted, which I continued to do all through my childhood and adolescence, which some people stop knowing they're dreaming, all the way up until my 20s, when I found out the term was called lucid dreaming.
Tell about how you found out about lucid dreaming.
Well, I'd come out to California to finish my PhD work in artificial intelligence, and through some work with a cognitive psychology professor, I had met someone who said, who knew about this term lucid dreaming, and I just found out from a therapist that the type of dreams I have is called lucid dreams. And I told him about my dreams. He said, "Oh, you have to meet my friend, Stephen LaBerge, who's also finishing his PhD and working at the Stanford Sleep Lab." So he introduced me to Stephen, and we immediately connected, and Stephen invited me to come and do studies at the Sleep Lab, which I did practically every month for a while, mostly in the 1980s.
Tell a little bit about what those were like. What was happening in those sleep studies? I mean, those sleep studies are famous. I mean, they're what sort of bring lucid dreaming into the consciousness of the Western world.
Right. It was a very exciting time, and I realized this even more after the fact. But the technology was not what it is today. We were hooked up, or I was hooked up as a subject with kind of this gluey substance that put electrodes all over my head, and I'd go into the laboratory connected to these wires and be expected to have a lucid dream while they were measuring both my physiology, my brain waves. And the reason for that was they wanted to show that I was definitely asleep and dreaming, right, and could signal from the dream world to tell them that, I knew I was dreaming. Well, a lot of times at the beginning the equipment would fail. I usually was pretty good at having a lucid dream when I was in the lab, and a lot of people were quite disturbed by the environment, so I was a really good subject. And we experiment with different techniques until we realized that because in REM sleep the eyes are not as, quote, paralyzed as the rest of the body is during sleep and dreaming, that I could move my eyes back and forth, my dream eyes, which would affect my physical eyes, left, right, and there would be a signal where I would not wake up, but they could see it on the polygraph and know that I was signaling that I knew I was dreaming. And from then on, it took a whole series of experiments where I would do a math problem, for example, or sing a song, and they'd look at my brain waves and how that how it compared to the waking brain usage of us doing the same tasks. I even came up with a signal of 8 eye movements to say I'm going to wake myself up. And so it was quite exciting. There were a lot of media came in. Magazines would bring their crew in and stay up all night watching me.
Tell some of those stories. What's one of the good stories from the media?
One of the best was Smithsonian, I think. They sent people to stay up all night. And, another one, though, was 2020 magazine, which had Hugh Downs come in and sleep in the lab. And I was in the room next to him. This was a really fun one. I forgot what my experiment was, but what I remember was after I did it, I told him that I would find him in my dream and take him for a flight, because I love to fly in my lucid dreams. And this particular night, I did the experiment, and sure enough, I found him in his brown bathrobe, which he had been wearing, earlier that evening. And I took him flew over the Bay Area to Oakland, where the Grateful Dead were playing, because I was one of these Deadhead fans. And we floated right above Jerry Garcia's head, who was still living then, and listened to the concert that I was missing because I was at the Stanford lab. And so he didn't have any recollection of me taking him flying, because he wasn't really an experienced lucid dreamer, but I thought it was a wonderful story and just a lot of fun as well.
I know that you made some use of lucid dreaming. So, for example, when you were going through some kind of periods of grief after your mother's death and around your father's death, you use lucid dreaming as kind of a way of working through some of these emotions and feelings. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually my first experience was when I was 18, so this is before I knew it was called lucid dreaming. But one of my best friends died, and I decided, well, she kind of appeared to me in dreams, or someone that looked and sounded exactly like her came into my dreams. And I slowly learned to be able to stay in the dream, to ask her questions, to listen. And that experience kind of taught me about what was possible, so that when my father died in 1992, it was really easy for me to go and find my dream dad and give him a big hug and tell him I missed him and really feel like I reconnected. Now with my mother, she died in the year 2000. It was harder for me because we used to speak on the phone pretty much every day, and so I really missed that connection with her. And when I started dreaming of her and then realizing that really she had died when I was lucid, I would say, wait a minute, this is my dream, she had died. And I talked to her about it. I went through a lot of different phases, but I really feel like it helped me process the grief of not having her around, and finding her in different phases, sort of where she appeared more comfortable and complete. And so I still dream of her occasionally, and sometimes I'm lucid and sometimes I'm not.
And I know that you've done some of your own experiments with lucid dreaming outside of what you were doing in the Stanford sleep labs. Can you talk about any of those?
Yeah, I used to be interested. I know one you probably have read about on my website. The scientists, this is when I was in the lab a lot at Stanford, the scientists in my dream were doing some kind of studies, and I said, well, wait a minute, why don't you watch me and see what happens? I'll wake myself up, I'll come to waking physical reality, and I'll come back into the same place. So I was sitting in a chair, I think, and I woke up and I wrote probably something down, and then I went back to sleep and I was in the same chair. And I said to the scientists in the dream, what did you notice while I went to this other reality? And they said, well, not much, except your eyes were moving back and forth. So in other words, it was as if I went into REM sleep in the dream and came back to physical reality.
So stepping out of the dream and coming back, and in the dream world, it's almost like you have a consciousness somewhere else and you're dreaming. I think it's very tricky.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun because I can usually go back into a same dream. Sometimes I would go in to a dream and change my reaction, such that the ending of the story would change, and see how that would affect things. So it was kind of a fun, practice in different kind of situations in my dream world for what I might be doing in my waking state.
It's really, I really like this starting to break down the boundaries between what the dream world is and what the waking world is, and some things, some of what that says about what is the nature of reality, what is sort of the nature of the experience that we're having right now. I think lucid dreaming is a very interesting way of kind of, carrying the waking consciousness in and starting to say, oh, what is this? I know that you've done some work with this, with how has lucid dreaming kind of changed your overall experience. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It was through lucid dreaming and becoming aware that I'm dreaming that I started questioning waking physical reality, also from a series of precognitive dreams I had, and it fits in kind of with other more Eastern or ancient traditions, but I basically found that in the dream world, I find when I'm lucid, very lucid, because it's actually a spectrum and not just an on-off state, when I'm very lucid, I know that anything's possible. I don't have limits. I don't have fears. I know that I'm more than just my body. I could let my dream body die in a dream and I will still wake up. So I decided that, well, maybe waking physical reality is really a dream, and it may have different sort of time-space elements, but it basically means that if waking reality is a dream, then maybe anything is possible. I can have less fear, and I can the difference really is how lucid am I in my life, which would also reflect having more of a higher state of consciousness. Is one way to put it.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like there's a scale of lucidity whether you're sleeping or you're dreaming.
Yeah, and I believe that anyone who just questions, could I be dreaming now, in whatever state, a waking state or a dream, even if they're not able to do anything in the dream, that's the beginning level of lucidity. Now, the next level might be that you're dreaming, but you're not able to do these things that you read about where people can control their dreams. That's not the important part. The important part is to know that you're dreaming so you can maybe feel safer, change your own responses. You don't have to change anything in the dream to be a lucid dream.
Right.
Although it is possible as you become more and more lucid, it's almost as if what you imagine or expect will appear in front of you. So it's as if you are changing the dream into any kind of place you want it to be.
It's actually interesting because I know we talked about this. You were on a panel with a fellow who was at that point head of a national union organization, and he had a lot of objections to the idea of lucid dreaming because it was controlling your dreams instead of mining something out of that. And you said some interesting things at lunch about how you didn't think that was true, how you were actually open to what was happening. Can you?
Yeah, I felt like what he and I were saying were very similar. If you don't expect that lucid dreaming means you have to change the dream. And actually, even though I can change the dream, I'm not as successful in some of my goals. I may have like a goal of what I'd like to try to do in a dream. I'm not as successful if I don't pay attention to what comes automatically into the dream. So an example of this was I used to lead a group, and we decided to try a mutual dreaming experiment. So this one particular woman wanted to meet up with me in a dream, and I said, okay, let's meet up in the Bahamas at a restaurant, and then we'll both report next week and see if we got there. So sure enough, I realized I'm dreaming by encountering this woman named Rose, who was a childhood neighbor of ours, and she had died many years ago. And she was trying to tell me something, and I said, Rose, you died. This is a dream. I've got to get to the Bahamas. So what happened was I had a series of obstacles in my way of getting to the Bahamas. I couldn't breathe underwater this time, or I'd fly into telephone poles and get tangled up, kind of silly things if you think about, what's possible in a dream. Well, I realized that I needed to talk to Rose, and after I had a conversation with her, which was very powerful in resolving some of the things that had gone on earlier in my life, I realized it was very easy. I was able to just, I think I went underwater and decided that when I came out of the water, I'd be in the Bahamas, and I was. And I found the restaurant, and I actually met up with a woman that looked like this, Sharon. And she did not report that next meeting that she had a dream in the Bahamas. But I found her and I told her a secret message. And I said, if you dream of me there in the future, let me know what the message was. So we play, some of us lucid dreamers play around with mutual dreaming as well.
And have you had any positive results from that experience?
You know, I have. There's a few friends of mine that I met through the Association of the Study of Dreams, which has been international. And some of my close friends will report every time we find each other, someone that resembles each other, because you can get mixed up, right, as to who you're really seeing. And sometimes there have been really close hits among us. There's one example where both people were standing, it was two of my friends that had a dream together, and they were both standing in a lagoon, and one of them was kind of not as lucid, not really paying attention, but did remember the same scene that the other person remembered when they were together.
I really like this idea that, in fact, by cultivating lucidity, you're rather than it's that you're controlling the dream and not being open to whatever arises in the dream, it's that you're having a more lucid understanding of what's actually arising in the dream. That is in some ways like the Tibetan Buddhist lucid dream practices, where in fact what you're doing is you're increasing your awareness in the dream, but that doesn't mean you're closing down the subconscious. It's almost like you're getting closer to what subconscious is.
Right. I think in dreams, for example, the witch example, as a lucid dreamer, you can do many things. You could run away from them, but you could also allow yourself to be attacked by them. You could change them into the Easter Bunny. People say that story. In my case, they flew away naturally. So later in my life, I actually went looking for them when I knew that I would feel safe and secure. And the first time they appeared as sort of just little old ladies, and I said, "What was it that you wanted all those years ago?" And they said, "Nothing." I've also went looking for them and try to find them in their scary state and use them as what I call my creative power. So when I was in the process of trying to get pregnant with my son and I was having some difficulties, I actually brought the witches into my body. They still appeared in a very scary space, but I thought of them as more potential, and so I would experiment with different things like this throughout my life. In terms of the witches, for example, I see them more as an aspect of myself.
That's a marvelous way of practicing some very embodied dreaming, of becoming coming back to the body. Just as a final thing, I know you talked to me a bunch about sort of lucid living and how lucid dreaming has brought you to lucid living. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, this is a good follow-on example. I started noticing that I had very similar reoccurring dreams with relationships in my waking state. So, for example, I would end up in a relationship with a guy who would be hovering over me, yelling like scary looking like the witches. Until one time, and I was actually sitting in this exact spot that we're sitting in this house, I said, "Wait a minute, if life's a dream, then I can experience this so-called argument in a different way. I can really see this person as a part of myself and really listen." And as soon as I thought that, this guy was in a relationship, just stopped screaming. He walked away, and he actually walked out of the door and out of my life. And that was the last relationship I had, where I met my husband after that, and I don't have these kinds of reoccurring arguments in the same way anyway, in the last 17 years that we've been together.
That's marvelous. That reminds me somewhat of a lot of the ways that they're using lucid dreams, for example, with PTSD sufferers, using lucid dreams as a way of sort of exorcising these things out of your life in the same way that you did as a child. That's a really wonderful full circle example. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing some of your really remarkable experience. What's your website? If you wanna...
My website is my last name, which is durso.org/Beverly. And
that's DURSO.
beverly.org/BEVERLY. And if you just even search for Beverly Lucid Dreaming, you'll find many, many other sites that I'm referenced in. But my papers that I write for conferences a few times a year, I always put on my website, and that's a way to, to connect up with people that are interested, like you found me.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.